And, I just always had the philosophy that, whatever I was going to do, no one was going to outwork me. And I was going to give anybody a real run for their money. And that's still a philosophy that I hold to this day.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Scott Monge of Monge Associates, accident attorneys based out of Atlanta. Scott, how are you doing today?
Hey, Justin, I'm doing fantastic and grateful for the opportunity to be here today.
Awesome. Well, I'm very glad to have you on. And I was talking to Scott a little bit in the pre-roll and a couple of days ago. He's a very interesting fellow who's got a lot going on and one heck of a head on his shoulders. So I'm really excited to talk with him and get to know him today. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and take a look first off at Scott's website. He's got a very clever URL that is becauseyouwanttowin.com. That's becauseyouwanttowin.com. Again, Scott runs Monge and Associates Accident Attorneys. You can give him a call if you've been injured. They're based out of Atlanta, but I do believe they work in multiple states. He's been seen in lots of different places. And you can give him a call at 888-477-0597. That's at least one of the many numbers, I'm sure, that'll get a hold of him. You can also just go to becauseyouwanttowin.com and fill out the form if you need the help of a qualified accident injury attorney like Scott. Our first sponsor for the day is nationalerc.org. You may have noticed the world went through a pandemic and many businesses were forced to shut down, had reduced hours, supply chain interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. It's not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It's essentially free money for your business in the form of a retroactive tax credit. And when you get it, you can use it in whatever way you see fit. There is no cost to apply. And if you visit nationalerc.org, they've helped over 400,000 different employee credits get credited and raised over $1.3 billion for small businesses like yours that never needs to be paid back. If you had W-2 employees during the pandemic, please visit nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with receives over $200,000 to invest in their business. And again, it never needs to be repaid because it's functionally a retroactive tax credit. The calculator is free and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. That's nationalerc.org. Our second sponsor is actually a brand new sponsor to the show, and it's andropology.com. Gentlemen, are you looking to take charge of your health and feel your best? Well, listen up. Whether it's managing type 2 diabetes, boosting your testosterone levels, or wanting to increase your overall longevity, andropology.com has got you covered. They dive deep into natural solutions from superfoods like spirulina and tart cherry extract to targeted fitness routines like high-intensity interval training that can help you reclaim your energy and vitality. At Andropology, it's all about practical, science-backed advice tailored specifically for men who want to improve their health without all of the fluff. Think of it as your go-to guide for navigating the complexities of men's health, simplified. From diet tips to supplemental recommendations, they have everything that you need to start making positive changes today. Visit andropology.com to explore the latest insights on living a healthier, better, more vibrant life. That's andropology.com, where better health begins. All righty, so we're going to jump back over here and let's talk to Scott. Scott, how are you doing again?
Hey, I am doing fantastic. Happy to be
Awesome.
here.
Well, happy to have you on, like I said. So let's introduce you to Scott. Scott Monge is the founder. It looks like Monge or Monge, but we talked beforehand. It's Monge, rhymes with bungee. So there we go. Scott Monge is the founder and CEO of Monge and Associates, an influential injury law firm based out of Atlanta, Georgia, that champions the rights of innocent injury victims against large insurance companies. He started his practice in 1993 from a small rented office and has grown it into one of the most recognized law firms in the country, known for its exceptional client service and a unique satisfaction guarantee during the initial 30 days of representation. Scott's dedication is helping others to Scott's dedication to helping others is reflected in his authorship of Secrets to Win Your Injury Case, a free resource for injury victims, and his leadership in charitable initiatives like the Gift of Hearing program, which provides free hearing aids for those who need. He's also deeply involved in community service, volunteering in various bar committees, speaking at legal seminars, and supporting causes that assist the homeless and school children in financial need. Outside of his professional life, he's a devoted family man and fitness enthusiast, starting his mornings with daily weight and cardio. Wakes up without an alarm, if I saw that correctly. His commitment to health and positive living fuels his belief that law is the ultimate sport where the goal is to secure the best possible outcome for his clients, reflecting his philosophy that life is all about helping others. That was a mouthful to say, and even still, I'm sure I missed a few things. So my first question to you, Scott, is what did I miss?
Well, first of all, thank you. I think you left out the Nobel Prize, Justin.
Oh, shoot. I'll talk to my secretary about that.
No, anyway, no, thank you for those for that very gracious introduction. And I think that was a very good summary. I would just add that our mission statement is we make good things happen for other people. And each year another, it's like in terms of, I may be the face of the firm, but there would be no firm without having a great team. And so I've got to give the credit back to my team. And every year the team votes on a theme for each year. And so our theme for 2024 is it's always impossible until it's done.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Scott also once rescued a bus full of orphan nuns from a fire, and no, I think that's a wonderful slogan. That's really good. So, Scott, give me your pitch. If I didn't know anything about you, if I hadn't done any pre-roll, analysis on you, et cetera, and I didn't know who you were, you and I were in an elevator. We had 30 seconds or so to travel up, and I said, Scott, what do you do? What would you tell me? Give me your pitch for your firm. Why do people find you? Who finds you? What do you do? Who do you help, et cetera?
Well, I guess in a sentence, I would say that we help injured people that are hurt through the fault of another person in its most simplest terms. And really, my style is more in terms of, what are the ways that we can add value. In other words, another great saying that I heard that's always stuck with me is nobody wants to be sold, that everybody wants to buy. And so I believe that when you're adding value, and that's naturally going to attract people to you. And there's no silver bullet, and everything works in one way or another for someone somewhere. And so it's just a matter, I think, of finding what works for you. And I think that involves a process of looking at every stage of the interaction, and especially identifying any areas of friction points, and addressing those and resolving those. But I think it also involves asking the question, what can I do differently? In other words, for example, Justin, the average person will have 3 personal injury cases in their lifetime.
Really?
And so then when we're looking at a person, it's just like, why would we, if our typical client, they have not been through this before, it's entirely new, it's entirely foreign. And, and when it's done properly, it should really be a partnership in which we are providing helpful information of value, and we're working together with the client. And, one of the greatest sources of, I think, of misunderstanding or possible stress is just that, when the client doesn't have all the information that they need, so they can make an informed decision, so they know what's going on with their case.
Never quite heard that statistic, but it does kind of make sense. I remember hearing one of these statistics that always stuck with me was, I think it was from John Hopkins. They said that medical malpractice is potentially the leading cause of death in the country when you look at it, how it breaks down. But a lot of times it doesn't get reported, or it's in places where it's capped and people can't pursue it or whatnot. But I never quite hit. But I guess when I think about it, it kind of makes sense to think that, the average person would have around 3. Some people would have fewer than that, but we do get injured a lot, and it's other people's cases. I've never heard that statistic before, and I found that was kind of a fascinating concept. I'm still trying to parse that into my own reality, if that makes sense. Like, does that make sense? And of course, I haven't lived my whole life yet, so who knows what'll be coming down the pike eventually. Um, that's interesting. No, I think you're exactly right. And again, the tagline of my show and my whole philosophy is if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. So absolutely, keeping people where they know what's going on, and especially if they know what their rights are. Because again, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And education and knowledge is the probably most important factor when it comes to making sure that your rights are protected and you get justice, you get what's coming to you. And so many people, I think, miss out because they just don't even know what to do. One of the reasons, and I've said this in the past with other interviews as well, I've always really appreciated the personal injury law firm model. And a lot of people give PI lawyers a bad name, oh, you're ambulance chasers or whatnot, but you guys work as functionally pro bono, right? People, they can pick up the phone, they can call you if they think you have a case. If they do have a case, you take the case, and usually you don't get paid unless you're successful in getting a win for your clients. So what you guys are doing functionally is making justice available for people that otherwise couldn't afford justice. And I think it's a fascinating model because it means you have to put your money where your mouth is in a real sense, right? You're saying, you know what? I think your case has merit, and I think we can get it for you. And I'm willing to go to bat for you, whatever the cost. And I think that's just phenomenal. So I've been a huge fan of that forever. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's
No,
always how I felt.
that's a great point, Justin. I mean, nobody would think of going to their doctor or their dentist or their mechanic and saying, listen, I will only pay you, and if you fix what my issue is. And yet, in terms of the contingency fee, it does have that helpful effect as far as balancing the scales of justice. And any person that's injured through a no fault of another person and has a valid claim, they can hire the best legal talent that they can find. And there's no reason that the search for the best talent should be limited to your hometown. Especially with with what we have today, there really are no borders, or at least not the borders that there were in the early days. And yeah, I've been doing this long enough that I've gone through a lot of different eras in terms of the yellow pages, in terms of television, in terms of internet. And there's so many different ways to reach people. And if there's certain ways that are challenging to make it. You kind of have to climb a big mountain, but once you make it over that barrier, then it kind of becomes a bit of a protective barrier, because not everybody can do it. And then there's other opportunities where it's just like anybody can go ahead and put their online shingle out immediately and
Yeah.
start connecting. So there's just you look at everybody has their practice model, and there's great examples of success in all these different areas. And the great thing about it is that the consumer has so many choices. I mean, when you look in 1976, when the United States Supreme Court decided the Bates decision and said at that time that lawyers can advertise. I mean, it's amazing to think that it wasn't until that time that that we were able to do that. And and even after that time, it took a while to catch hold. And but now there's just so many choices available to the consumers, and I think that ups the game for everybody. And we're all in the people business, and just like any other category, we're very review driven, and we want to do a good job for our clients. So they'll tell our family and their family and their friends, and those are often going to be your regardless of how much marketing you do. And marketing, I would define very simply as, everyone you talk to, everyone that you touch. And, a good case is a good case wherever it is. And so it's just like you never know where the next one's going to come from. And so that's why it's important to be kind and nice and treat everyone as best you can. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice.
Good way to put it. I like that. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. That's good. You remind me a lot of my oldest daughter's godfather. Now, I was just trying to figure out who you were reminding me of, and it just clicked in my head. His name is Brian, lives out in Colorado. I'm sure you don't know him, but he's a great guy, and you give me a very much a Brian vibe. So, Brian, if you're out there, it's
Well,
good
thank
seeing you,
you.
man. Well, Scott, let me ask you this. What got you into law, right? Were you the kid that grew up on Perry Mason show and, everyone else is outside playing G.I. Joe and you're inside, shelling briefs for your pretend case? Did you do mock trial in high school? Did you know you wanted to be an attorney or did you fall into this, kind of haphazardly? And beyond law, what got you into PI?
Well, my background is at the time I was growing up, my dad was working in a family business, which was a car wash business, and my I was the oldest of four kids, and my mother was busy, busy raising all of us, and I didn't have any lawyers in my family, so it wasn't there wasn't really anyone to talk to me, so I wasn't really sure what being a lawyer even really encompassed. It's just that I like some of the classes and topics that traditionally fed into that, such as political science and history and things like that. But it doesn't take that background. Anyone can be a lawyer with any particular type of background. But so there wasn't anything in particular, and I didn't, so I just basically I went through and I just kind of went from step to step to step, and it was just kind of a natural next step for me.
So you knew you wanted to go into law school and you went to law school and then from there, did you go immediately into PI law or did you dabble in a few other areas first? What drew you into personal injury?
So in regards to it's kind of like when first of all, in regards to I don't think any client wakes up in the morning wondering where their lawyer went to law school. I think it's far more important. I think that that people know. I mean, people care more about how much you know, and how much you care than how much you know. And so, I guess, I started work at a very early age in terms of, probably starting at age 8, recycling aluminum, age, 10, going on to becoming a paper boy, delivering newspapers. Um, After that, getting a work permit, starting at age 14, mowing lawns, yards, whatever I could do. Um, and, I just always had the philosophy that, whatever I was going to do, no one was going to outwork me. And I was going to give anybody a real run for their money. And that's still a philosophy that I hold to this day. I don't take anything for granted. And so, so in any event, I mean, after that, I went ahead and after, finishing up the academic portion, I went ahead, I packed all my earthly belongings at the back of my 1984 Chevy Chevette. And drove from my home in the Midwest to Atlanta. And, it was a four-cylinder vehicle. It had three cylinders that were working. It was July. It had no AC. It had a roof liner that was coming down. And, I just was a perfect example of someone that really was just starting at ground zero, which was exactly the experience that I wanted. My heroes, those folks that I've always looked up to have been immigrants and those that just basically kind of, started with nothing and decided to make an attempt to stake their claim in the world and see what happened. And so the really great thing about that kind of start, Justin, is if I'd lost everything, I would only be out about $15. And but I just immediately went from there. I mean, I was started doing court appointed work for $50 a case. If I was lucky, I got 3 cases a week on that, and doing other types of cases. I was in court all the time, every single day. I knew the parking attendants on a first name basis. I practiced all types of law. Uh, you know, the the joke is that it was called rent law because you did whatever you needed to do to pay the rent. And but the advantage of that to me was there really was no order of difficulty. Within 6 months of passing the bar exam, I did my first jury trial, and I just figured this is what lawyers did. And so I was always in court. I always had an expectation the cases were going to go to jury and were going to go to verdict. And so that was, that was what I did. And just along the way, I met a lot of really great people, and that just were real. No one makes it alone in this world. So anything that happens, again, I got to throw the credit back to a really great team.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So your firm, you are based out of Atlanta, but you do work in a much wider area. Is that right? Roughly how big of a territory do you guys operate in?
We go wherever the case is. A good case is a good case, wherever it is.
Okay. So you go as far as Alaska or even further. Go to
Sure,
Hawaii. If somebody found you, said, "Hey, you're the guy. Come find me." And I guess you would find someone that was, past the bar in that state and go represent them more or less. Is that the concept?
sure, sure. I mean, we're licensed in most places, and where we're not, we can connect with those that are.
Would there ever be any opportunity for international travel? I know that's kind of a weird question, but I've never really considered the fact, I mean, American law is so different from, other countries. I mean, there's similarities, obviously. Would it ever make sense to bring in an outsider, a pinch hitter from the States in, I don't know, Luxembourg or Dubai or Shanghai?
Well, with our team, we source the best talent wherever it can be found. And sometimes that means team members are going to be in different countries. So I've got a trip coming up here in about a month or so outside the United States to visit some of our team members that are there.
Very nice. Very nice. Hopefully, beautiful and tropical or
Somewhat,
maybe
somewhat.
some. So I mentioned before the pandemic, and this is something I'm always kind of just intrigued to. It's hard to believe it's already 4 years ago that the pandemic basically hit us, and it's kind of come and gone. And God willing, stays gone. But I noticed that different people in different places had very different experiences based on the local decisions, state decisions, county decisions, city decisions on what they could and couldn't do. So I'm curious how the shutdown from that pandemic affected you, Scott? How did it affect your firm, and how did it affect the way that you took care of your clients?
Yeah, so that's a great question because the pandemic affected everybody, right? So in terms of so in terms of how did the pandemic affect us? Uh, we were one of the fewer firms that expanded, and the reason for that was severalfold. First of all, it's I always view down markets as the greatest opportunity to go ahead and make progress. So we viewed it as a time to make investments in the future during the pandemic, and I also too made a promise to the members of our team that we're all in this together. That at a time when unemployment had skyrocketed to approximately 14%, I promised my team that there would be no layoffs. Everybody had a job, and if anybody was going to go without a paycheck, it would be me. And so, we went through, and we had we had the good fortune of having converted everything to the cloud approximately a week before the whole world started to shut down for the pandemic. And you just adapt as best you can, and it changes the mindset. Previous to the pandemic, the mindset was, well, a person's got to be in the office to be productive and be working. And then really coming out of the pandemic, the mindset really shifted just into, does it really matter so much where a person is as long as they are productive? And the other thing too that it did is it really forced innovation that was always there to finally happen, and happen on in a way that was widespread. And so a lot of these things that we have, even for instance this podcast that we're doing right now. I mean, prior to the pandemic, you didn't see this degree of Zoom conferences and in the legal category. Now it's commonplace, and to the point you could even have an entire trial done by way of virtual video experience.
Would you ever want to appear before a Zoom jury, or do you think that would detract from the experience?
I think it depends what you compare it to. Compared to having no jury trials for 2 years, hey, that sounds pretty good because it's compared to nothing. It's anything sounds better. But compared to having the real life experience, that's I choose the real life experience. So it just depends what you compare it to.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Um, No, I would agree with that. I've talked with a number of people, and even beforehand, I always give the same advice I gave to you. I said, look towards the camera as much as you can. It simulates eye contact. I think the one thing I've heard people say is about a Zoom jury is sometimes the most important moment in a trial is when the prosecution or the defense, whoever, they say something and you know that they're wrong, and you look over and you make eye contact with a jury member, and they look at you, you look at them, and you're like, they know, they got it, you locked in. Like I would think that that aspect of a Zoom call would be very it would be lacking. You can't really, I can't actually make eye contact with you. When I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at you. When I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at you.
Sure.
Which I imagine would be frustrating. But again, I think you're also right. It's infinitely better than zero jury trials at all. So um I don't know. Have you ever been on a jury before? I've always thought it interesting to see if attorneys ever get on juries, either before they started practicing law, or every so often after they started practicing law.
Yeah, so I've been called for jury duty. I've gone through voir dire in terms of jury selection. I haven't actually been selected for a jury though.
I think they just don't want another. They don't want you to take over the jury pool.
I don't know. I don't know. On the other hand, we've had members of our firm that have been called and surprisingly have been chosen for jury. But that was my experience.
That's interesting. I wonder what would happen. Has it ever happened where someone gets called in for jury duty and they have a case going on? Like you have to postpone a case because of a case. Like, does that happen? Is that something that courts are under? I mean, assuming if you're doing your civic duty, they would understand. I guess I never really considered the ramifications in the legal realm.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, I think generally it's just a question of reasonableness, and at the end of the day, most people are going to be reasonable about things.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've been practicing, you crossed the 30-year mark last year, if I did my math correctly. So congratulations on that.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I'm sure in your career, Scott, you've probably had, I mean, nobody, as I said before, nobody bats 1,000 if you bat long enough, right? Everyone has to strike out here and there or swing and a miss. I always like to ask, can you tell my listeners about one of your biggest, what you would consider a failure or a setback that you experienced in your practice of law, but what did it teach you, and how do you carry that forward to make sure you're always giving the best care to your clients?
Yeah, well, what a great question. There's been so many over that amount of time that it's really hard to even narrow it to one. But I'll say this, I think that, all too often, I think that society gets the idea of failure wrong. Instead, I try to view these things as lessons. And, as my dad said once, everything in life is a lesson. And the key thing is just to not to let it get you down. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. Winston Churchill said, true courage is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And so it's just a chance to start again, or it's a chance to be redirected. And so I think when there are those times of challenge, failure, and adversity, you want to those are times to think of the good times. And, when you have the good times, I think you want to think back to some of those failures and just, realize, how quickly things can change. It's just, I mean, most of what I deal with are challenges. If someone does something, gets a great result, um, and especially if I didn't know about it, hats off to them, congratulations to them. And that's just part of being a leader. You want to give the credit back to your team. And and then the other part is, when things go in the other direction is just learning the lessons and, and looking at it as an opportunity. Okay. What can we do to remedy this situation, or what can we do in this process to make this, a better practice that's going to serve more people?
Well, the flip side of a moment like that is successes. And 30 years in the business, I'm sure you've had some some big wins. And some of those are going to be big monetary wins. And obviously those are the ones that are sometimes fun to show on a billboard or what have you. But sometimes they're just personal wins as well. What are a couple of the cases, Scott, as much as you're able to say that you're most proud of? Maybe it was a case when you thought everything was going to go against you and there's no way you're going to pull it out. And then not only did you win and the jury sided with you, but awarded your client more than you thought that they were going to get, or something like that. Or, just you saw somebody whose life was in shambles and you helped them put the pieces together. What are a couple of the biggest wins that you've had, that the feathers in your proverbial cap, that when you're falling asleep at night, you're like, yeah, we did good on that one?
Yeah, I'd have to go back to very early in my career. I had a client that was a sweet old lady, volunteered at the church, and she was hit by a drunk driver from Canada, and and after it happened, he went back to Canada, and nobody knew where he was, and we had a really hard time finding him, and eventually we were able to go ahead and locate him, and we got him served with a lawsuit, just as fast as we could, especially because we weren't sure how long he was going to be in the country. And then at the time I was fresh out of law school. And I was still very much learning my ways and learning the ropes. And the other counsel was a great attorney that had literally written the book in terms of how to handle auto insurance claims. The book that I was using, that I would go to anytime I had questions, was written by my opposing counsel. And, it just seemed like everything was new. And I just worked that case. I worked that case, and it just became my obsession, my every minute. And, I just overcame a lot of challenges in terms of discovery motions that we filed based on the other side's not producing documents to us, not showing up for depositions, all of which were granted. And then after, having invested pretty much everything I had and devoting all my time to this, then the other side filed a motion to try to get me kicked off the case, which was denied, and they were sanctioned for attorney's fees. And we ended up getting a real great result, but it was just such a great experience with the client, where, you were working in partnership, and I'm getting to know her very well. I'm getting to know her adult son, who is an accountant, very well. And, we're working together in partnership. And, there's so, I guess in that one case, just because it covered so many different areas, it really just became kind of an example of the template that I used for so many other cases that came after that. And that's the way I see it. It's just every case, just like life, Justin, every experience builds on every other experience. And so, I don't think it's, I don't think it's right to want an easy life without challenge. I mean, what fun would that be? But it's kind of like the more challenges you have, I think the more that just builds up a person's, mental fortitude. And so it's kind of like you just look at people, and sometimes people have success early in life, some people have it in the middle, some people have it later. But you just see so many kids where, if they had a perceived success early in life, where everything they wanted was just given. It's like when you ask people what they're proud of, nobody says, I was just proud of this gift that somebody just gave to me. Whatever they're proud of, it usually involves overcoming a challenge, adversity, or hardship. And so, people are generally happiest when they're making progress. And that usually comes by doing things that are hard. And, it's just, life is hard. And once you accept that premise, then it becomes easier. And I tell my people, listen, don't expect everything to be easy. Expect it to be hard. And, if it's not as hard as you think, then okay, then that's great. But, you never want to go in expecting anything in life to be easy, because then you're just setting yourself up for, disappointment is that gap between expectation and reality.
The way to put it. Um, Question, because you mentioned early on in this case, the guy was from Canada. What happens if they flee the country? Like, is there any kind of a legal process, extradition or whatnot? If somebody from another country comes in here, harms somebody, and then leaves, do you work through national governments and whatnot? What would have happened if, because you said you had to, file the suit quickly before he left. What would have happened if he was already in Canada?
Yeah. Well, we probably, in this case, we served him, so he was subject to the jurisdiction here, and his insurance company appointed local counsel, American lawyers to represent him here. And so, but you still have you still get that feedback as far as, and this is the days before Zoom, where there was no Zoom option. And so it's like when it came time to do his deposition, it's like, listen, we need him here. And I would hear things like, well, he's not cooperating, he doesn't want to come, and this might affect the coverage. And it's just like, those arguments just never really carried any weight with me. And I'm like, well, okay, well, listen, here's the opportunity. The most important thing when you're representing injured parties is, my motto is set a deadline and make it happen. And you just always want to move the case forward. So it's like, we'll be reasonable. If somebody needs a little more time, no problem. We'll work with you in good faith, but you got to set a deadline and make it happen. Otherwise, so many of these cases would just never resolve if you didn't have a trial date.
I like that. That's that again, just good advice. It's a good proverb, a good maxim. Set a deadline and make it happen. I might have to put that on my wall, actually. That's a good one. Set a deadline and make it happen. So let me ask you this again, 30 years of practice. I'm sure you've encountered absurdities. And I found one of my new favorite questions to ask is just what's one of the weirdest, wackiest, oddest, most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law? It could be a client, it could be a situation, a scenario, a judgment, a judge, whatever it happens to you. What's one of the weirdest or funniest things you've encountered in your practice of law, Scott?
Let's see. Well, I guess one example that comes to mind, Justin, would be, once, again, early in my practice, I was local counsel for an out-of-state lawyer that had an unusual type of case. And anyway, as local counsel, my role was basically just to um, advise on local law and procedure, et cetera. And so that was my role. And anyway, so in terms of that role, we got the lawsuit filed, and then all of a sudden the client went crazy and was making accusations against his lawyer, and there's all this acrimony and chaos between the two of them. And again, I'd never met the client. I didn't have a contract directly with the client. I was totally separate from that client. And and uh and ended up going from a different court to multi-district litigation to federal judge down on the Mexican border of Mexico, and who then let out the lead counsel, and kept me in a case that I really knew nothing about. And at one point even ordered me to come down to this little Texas town on the Mexican border for a hearing on 48 hours notice. And it's just insane, and it's one of those, it was just a crazy situation. And you always want people to act reasonably and be in good faith. And I've just never understood when you have a situation where you have a client and you have lawyers that, have different ways of seeing things, why would you want to, force them to be together if it's not necessary? So, so anyway, um, that reminds me of a joke I'd like to share, if that's okay.
Please do.
Topic. So Justin, do you know what the difference between God and a federal judge is? The difference is God doesn't think he's a federal judge.
Fair enough. I like it. That's good. I always actually a question I've asked in the past, I usually don't get an answer is what's your favorite lawyer joke or what's your favorite, attorney joke? Because there's a lot of them out there, right?
Yeah.
What do you call 1,000 attorneys at the bottom of the ocean? A good start.
Yeah.
I joke, of course.
Well, to answer your question, gosh, I guess how I would answer that question by saying, what's the difference between, or excuse me, what do heaven and trial both share in common, Justin? Everybody wants to go, just not today.
There you go. I like that. I like that as well. I like anybody that's got some jokes on standby. That's awesome. So you get 2 extra bonus points just for that. So I
Thank,
hereby
thank,
award you those bonus
thank you.
points. You have such a good demeanor, Scott. Let me ask you this: how do you balance your personal life and your professional responsibilities? How do you balance your commitment to your family, your commitment to your firm, your commitment to yourself, your fitness, your faith
Yeah.
life, etc. How do you balance all of that on a regular, daily, weekly, even monthly basis?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question because that's has come up in terms of some recent reviews I've been doing in terms of some members of our team, and I would answer that question by quoting Jeff Bezos, who when speaking of work life, and he described it this way. He said, it's really more of a work life harmony than because a work life balance implies a trade off. Like I have to be doing one or I'm doing the other. Uh, or the other. Whereas if you at your work, if you feel that you are being productive in what you're doing, you're going to have a sense of fulfillment. And when you come home, you're going to feel good about the day that you've had. And when you come home, if your home life is there and you're surrounded by people that you love, and that's giving you that energy back, then when you go into work the next day, you're going to feel good about that. And so it's more of like a circle. And when you look at people that achieve great things, I mean, in life, it's usually not because they were working 9 to 5, right? I mean, balance is important to a lot of people, but if you look at those people that achieved things of value in their life and gave back to society, I mean, these are people that went all in and gave it everything they had. And and people respect that. I think people respect the dignity of work. And it's just you just people don't respect people that don't work. I mean, Justin, listen, I know a lot of jokes about unemployed people, but none of them work.
My oldest son loves bad puns. It's probably my greatest source of pride as a father, and I'm gonna have to tell him that one later. Um, I love that. That's great. Well, Scott, let me ask you this: what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years bringing for you and for the legal landscape in injury law? What are the big changes coming down the pipeline? What are you most excited about? What are things that are really like up and coming and cutting edge of law?
Yeah. Well, everything's becoming connected. It's like, listen, when I first started practicing, um, there were about 2 counties that I worked in, and they were adjacent. And then that went to a state, and then that went beyond the state borders. And and now when someone graduates from school, instead of in terms of a degree in that, or excuse me, licensed in that particular jurisdiction, they also can get a national bar exam score, in which if they score well enough, they can be licensed in up to 38 or 40 states. And so I think that a lot of the changes that happen in other industries, Justin, they're slow to come to law. And you see this more and more where law is getting in step with with changes that have been commonplace with others. So to answer your question is, I think in moving forward, it's just you're going to see more and more in terms of legal brands that are going to be crossing different markets with the
You think you're going
internet.
to start
Is
seeing like the self-driving car cases, things like that? Are dash cams that are built on these cars now going to play a bigger part in mitigating, laws? Like, are there anything like that you're just like, wow, this is gonna be really cool when we get there? Like, are you going to be suing Tesla if their AI gets into a car accident, or is it still the user? Or is that something that there's not even laws on the books to address?
Yeah. I mean, vehicles that are produced today, they're in such good working order that they can go for a long, long time. I mean, the vehicle that I drive's got 158,000 miles, and as long as it's running, I've got no desire or need to ever get rid of it. And so, those things so I just think I think it's got a long way to go in terms of the horizon on vehicles. And I can remember hearing that mentioned many years ago, but I think it's got a long way to go.
Fair enough. Well, Scott, again, I really appreciate. I've really actually genuinely enjoyed this conversation. I think you are very witty and you've got a lot of wisdom and a lot of proverbial wisdom in there, which I really enjoyed. And you've got some good jokes as well. But I don't want to take up your entire Friday, so we'll wind down the interview here in a minute. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you my two closing questions, and my listeners already know those questions, but they are just so you can percolate on these for a minute. If you can go back in time, meet young Scott, give him some advice. What advice would you give to yourself and why? And if I gave you my magic, now it's a pencil, I guess. I don't know where my magic pen went, folks. I'm sorry, but I have a magic pencil as well. And it's just it's a number two pencil. It's a Bic. It's a 0.7 millimeter lead. But this magic pencil can strike laws from the books, edit laws on the books, add new laws, change laws, etc. And if I were to loan you my magic mechanical pencil here, and you could make it change the law, what would you change and why? While you percolate on that, we're going to jump over one more time and take a look at your website. If I can get Zoom to cooperate with me, it's being very slow all of a sudden. I
Okay.
don't have my window. Oh, there we go. So again, I am talking with Scott Monge, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Monge and Associates Accident Attorneys. They are based out of Atlanta, but they work with people across the whole United States. If you got a case, Scott's willing to make it happen. So if you are injured in any way, feel free to reach out to Scott. Take a look at his firm. Again, we'll have links to links to his website down below. It's a very memorable website. Becauseyouwanttowin.com. You can also call 888-477-0597 and set up a free consultation with Scott. He can definitely help you out. It sounds like he's got a whole team of amazing people there working in his firm, which is really cool. Our last sponsor for today is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, Reuters, AP News, etc., and to see those articles ranking locally, nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and often permanently. This is like guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or your law firm, please visit rankwithnews.com to learn more, to book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, win credibility and more customers and clients, or build credibility and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. All right, Scott. So you and I magically travel back in time, if my Zoom will come offline here. There we go. And we meet young Scott. It's 1993. He's got all of his belongings in the back of his, what did you say it was? A 84
Yes, 84 Chevy Chevette.
Chevy Chevette. And you're able to stop yourself and just give yourself a little bit of advice other than the obvious, which is trust me, in about 25 years, there's going to be a thing called Bitcoin. Just buy it and hold, trust me. But outside of the obvious, what advice would you give to yourself and why?
I would advise myself to get a personal trainer in my 20s instead of waiting until my 40s, like I did. And so I would do that just so, if you're not exercising with the right form, you're wasting the move. And so I wasted a lot of moves by not doing that sooner. And in regards to the law, I would just take your magic marker and I would cross out any law that interfered with a personal injury victim who had been hurt through the fault of another person, any law that interfered with their ability to recover their full measure of damages.
I mean, that's a quick, succinct answer, but I like that. I hear about so many places where it's particularly medical malpractice seems to be a big one where I think it just gets capped artificially and it's capped on a number that was 30 years old and back then might have been big enough for a lot of people, but especially in the modern era, it's nothing. So I think that's fascinating. As far as a personal trainer goes, what's your favorite kind of exercise? It sounds like you do weights, it sounds like you do lots of stuff. If you had to choose for the rest of your life only one kind of exercise, what would you be doing?
It would be a bench press chest exercise.
All right. What do you bench?
I usually like to bench. Boy, I don't know, Justin. You're gonna hold kind of putting it out there for the whole world.
Yeah.
Um, I like to
It's
bench.
okay.
I like to bench 225 pounds.
That's not bad at all. That's basically me. So
Well,
with one of my kids
well,
on my or something.
it all depends what you compare it to. It's all relative, but I just find it helps. It helps. It's, for me, that's my therapy. Uh, so that's my therapy. So it just helps me just kind of focus and clear my head.
Awesome. I mentioned in our pre-roll, I'm not going to go too far into this, that I have a cousin who had struggled with alcohol addiction. And actually one of the things for him that really kind of helped him get clarity was going to the gym and yeah, it's like this, he literally he'll even post on social media, this is my therapy session or whatnot. I'm like, you know what? Good for you. Although the correct answer was your favorite thing to what do you bench normally? Cars off of little old ladies to rescue them, right? That was the correct answer, but that's
Hey,
okay. You can
exactly.
Well, Scott, I always like to let my guests have the final word. Is there any parting words of wisdom? Not that you haven't already dropped a lot on my listeners, because you are again just a wealth of good proverbial wisdom. But is there any parting words of wisdom or just parting thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, I would say do what you have to so now so you can do what you want to later.
Again, that is short, sweet, succinct proverbial wisdom. I love it. That's that's absolutely wonderful. Well, Scott, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. This has been The Attorney Post. I am, as always, your host, Justin West. If you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening on any of the podcast repositories, we always appreciate you rating us, commenting, etc. Most importantly, if you know somebody that could benefit from this information, perhaps you have a friend or family member who was injured, please feel free to share this podcast with them. Help them get the help that they need. As again, I always say, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been chatting with Scott Monge of the Monge and Associates accident attorneys down in Atlanta. And while this podcast does deal with lots of different legal realms and lots of different legal speculations, it does not constitute legal advice. And you should always seek the competent advice of an attorney in your area on matters that you need help with. However, after having this wonderful conversation with Scott, I can fully recommend him. And I do recommend, if you are injured, particularly in and around his neck of the woods, but basically anywhere, please reach out to Monge and Associates at becauseyouwanttowin.com, which is a really clever title. And again, share this podcast with anyone that can use it, because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, thanks for listening, guys, and bye-bye.